It was the kind of horror story you'd expect to find in a movie, not in the quiet suburbs of Wichita, Kansas. For over 3 decades, a faceless predator stalked the community, terrorizing families and haunting investigators with a taunting signature, BTK. Find them, torture them, kill them. The name alone sent chills down the spine of an entire generation. But behind that monstrous title was not a shadowy drifter, not a deranged outcast. He was Dennis Rader, a husband, a father, a church president, and a city compliance officer. A man who hid his darkness in plain sight for over 30 years. This is the horrifying true story of the BTK Killer. Our story begins in 1974, when Wichita, Kansas was the kind of place where people left their doors unlocked and waved to their neighbors. But on January 15th, that sense of safety was shattered forever. When the Otero family didn't show up for work or school, friends grew concerned. Police arrived at the Otero home, only to find a scene of unimaginable brutality. Joseph and Julie Otero, along with 2 of their children, 9-year-old Joseph Jr. and 11-year-old Josephine, were found strangled to death. The crime was methodical, controlled, and deeply personal. There was no sign of forced entry, no theft, no motive. Whoever had done this wasn't just a killer. He was a predator who enjoyed control and fear. The city was paralyzed. The newspapers called it one of the most shocking murders in Kansas history. But what no one knew then was that the killer wasn't done. He was just getting started. Just 3 months later, in April 1974, a young woman named Catherine Bright was attacked in her home. Her brother, Kevin, survived the encounter and described the attacker as a man in his 20s or 30s with a calm, almost polite demeanor. He had pulled a gun, tied them up, and stabbed Catherine repeatedly before fleeing. Kevin managed to survive despite being shot in the head, and his testimony became one of the few early clues to the BTK's identity. Still, investigators were baffled. There were no fingerprints, no clear evidence, and the killer seemed to vanish after each attack. But then, in a chilling twist, the murderer reached out to the media himself. In October 1974, a local newspaper received a letter. The writer claimed responsibility for the Otero murders, describing gruesome details only the killer could know. He introduced himself to the world with 3 simple letters, BTK. He explained what it stood for: bind them, torture them, kill them. And at the end of the letter, he warned, the code words for me will be: bind them, torture them, kill them, BTK. The killer had just named himself, and in doing so, began a decades-long game of cat and mouse with the police and the press. In the years that followed, BTK went quiet. But his silence was never permanent. He would disappear for years, then strike again, leaving the community on edge. In 1977, he murdered Shirley Vian, a 24-year-old mother of 3, after breaking into her home and tying her up. Her children were locked in a bathroom while their mother was killed just feet away. Later that same year, he struck again, killing 25-year-old Nancy Fox in her home. And once again, he couldn't resist bragging about it. This time, BTK called the police himself. In a chillingly calm voice, he reported the murder, giving the address and even spelling the victim's name. Detectives who listened to the tape were struck by his control and composure. He didn't sound angry or emotional. He sounded methodical, like he was describing a routine task. BTK's need for attention grew stronger with each murder. He sent letters, poems, and drawings to the police and the local press, taunting investigators and mocking their inability to catch him. He referred to his victims as projects and compared himself to other infamous killers like Jack the Ripper. The FBI profilers who studied the case concluded that BTK wasn't just a sadist, he was a narcissist. He wanted recognition. He wanted to be feared. And more than anything, he wanted to be known. But by the late 1980s, BTK seemed to vanish once again. Wichita slowly began to heal. Years passed. New generations grew up without ever hearing the name. Some began to wonder if the killer had died or moved away. But then, in 2004, 30 years after the first murders, BTK came back. It began with a letter sent to the Wichita Eagle newspaper. Inside was a copy of a chapter from a crime book about the Otero murders, along with a note. "Can I communicate with you through the newspaper?" The letter was signed BTK. It was him. He was alive. And after decades of silence, he wanted the spotlight again. The police and FBI were stunned. BTK's reappearance after so long was almost unheard of in criminal history. They reopened the old case files, using new forensic technology to re-examine every shred of evidence. Meanwhile, BTK continued to send packages, letters, photos, even a doll tied up with ropes in a cereal box, representing one of his victims. He was as cruel and theatrical as ever. Investigators began to play along, hoping to trick him into making a mistake. And eventually, he did. In one of his letters, BTK asked if he could safely send information on a computer disk without it being traced. The police responded publicly, saying it would be safe, a trap he walked right into. A few weeks later, the Wichita police received a purple floppy disk from BTK. The metadata on the disk revealed something extraordinary. It had been used by someone at Christ Lutheran Church and last modified by a user named Dennis. A quick search led them to Dennis Rader, a 59-year-old church council president and code enforcement officer for the city of Park City. When investigators dug deeper, everything began to fit. His job gave him access to homes, his church position gave him respect, and his demeanor made him invisible. They obtained a DNA sample from Rader's daughter's medical record and compared it to evidence found at the BTK crime scenes. It was a match. On February 25, 2005, Dennis Rader was pulled over near his home and arrested. At first, he played dumb, asking police, "Why are you taking me?" But when confronted with the evidence, his mask finally fell. During interrogation, Rader shockingly confessed to all 10 known murders in cold, chilling detail. He described his projects with pride, explaining how he would stalk his victims for weeks, studying their routines before striking. He spoke of his alter ego, Factor X, which he claimed drove him to kill. He even recited his crimes as if they were achievements. In court, Rader pleaded guilty to 10 counts of first-degree murder. There was no trial. He confessed to everything. But during his sentencing hearing, the world finally heard the true depths of his depravity. In a flat, emotionless tone, he described each murder step by step, recounting how he tied up, tortured, and killed his victims. The courtroom was silent, filled with gasps and tears as families listened to the man who had destroyed their lives speak about it as casually as reading a grocery list. Rader was sentenced to 10 consecutive life terms, one for each victim, ensuring he would spend the rest of his life behind bars. Today, Dennis Rader remains in a maximum security prison in Kansas, where he is known to spend most of his days alone, writing letters and reflecting on his so-called legacy. But perhaps the most chilling part of the BTK story is how ordinary Rader appeared. He was the president of his church council, a Boy Scout leader, a devoted husband, and a father of 2. Neighbors described him as polite and responsible. Yet behind closed doors, he was meticulously planning his next kill, creating detailed sketches and journals of his crimes, and reliving them for decades. The BTK case remains one of the most disturbing examples of the double-life killer, someone who can hide behind a mask of normalcy while harboring a monstrous secret. He craved attention, control, and recognition, and in a twisted way, his capture finally gave him all of those things. Even years later, BTK's legacy continues to fascinate and horrify true crime followers. His case has been studied by FBI profilers, inspired documentaries, and even influenced pop culture characters like Dexter and Mindhunter's killers. But at its core, the story of Dennis Rader is not about fame. It's about the devastating cost of evil hidden in plain sight. In the end, Rader once said something haunting during one of his interviews. "I'm a monster," he admitted, "but I didn't mean to be." But the truth is, he chose every single act. Every knot he tied, every life he took, all planned, all intentional. And while he may have wanted to be remembered as a legend, history remembers him for what he truly was, a coward who found power in the suffering of others. The story of the BTK Killer is a grim reminder that evil doesn't always wear a mask. Sometimes, It smiles at you from across the street.